Tonight, Premier Christy Clark unveils her cabinet, naming 8 women and 12 men to her executive, the new face of the Liberal government, ahead on Top Story.
And the choice was this, to have a much, much bigger cabinet with fresh perspectives at it, or have a cabinet that was almost the same size. Those decisions were very, very difficult.
Good evening, happy Friday, and welcome to Top Story. I'm Michael Eckford. Premier Christy Clark announced her new cabinet team this afternoon. There were some familiar faces reappointed to key positions, and there were a few surprises. In all, 19 ministers were appointed, along with 2 newly created portfolios, natural gas development and technology and innovation. For more on the composition of the Liberal government, we're joined from Victoria by our Legislative Bureau Chief, Keith Baldry. Hello, Keith. Hi, Keith.
Yeah. Hello, Michael. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine. Thank you. Everybody likes to talk about this, but let's start off, first of all, with the generalized new face. There were a few new positions and a lot of new ministers today. Was it surprising? Any surprises?
Well, I think the surprises weren't so much some of the new first-time MLAs who got in. I mean, everybody expected Peter Fassbender to get in there. It's the jobs the portfolios they're actually given. I don't think a lot of people saw Todd Stone, the young up-and-coming guy from Kamloops, getting the huge transportation portfolio. I think he was on everybody's list to perhaps make cabinet, but that's a pretty senior portfolio, as is education for Fassbender. And some of the backbenchers as well made the grade that I don't think a lot of people had on their list. So Stone, of course, transportation minister. Peter Fassbender, a big portfolio as well, the education portfolio. So Fassbender goes from being associated with negotiating things like the RCMP contract, dealing with TransLink. Suddenly he's going to be dealing with the BC Teachers Federation. I don't even think he saw that coming just a few days ago. So that's another big one. Rich Coleman, the standalone natural gas ministry, is a big one. Coleman is deputy premier, and he's the minister responsible for that. That's not surprising. I mean, this has been Rich Coleman's bailiwick for some time, is the energy sector. So he gets this carved out special sector, which is the natural gas portfolio, which again, is a new creation by Christy Clark, very much at the heart of her economic strategy going forward. And finally, the other big name, you're going to be hearing a lot from this guy in the weeks ahead, because it always goes with whoever is the health minister in this province. You're in the news all the time, usually for often the wrong reasons. So Terry Lake is the new health minister. He moves over from the environment, but Lake now the health minister. He's a former veterinarian. Not sure that necessarily qualifies as a health minister, but there you go. He does have some medical background. And he did, I think, fairly well in the environment ministry, Michael. So those are just some of the key appointments. And there are others, of course, but we just thought we'd take a look at those. And
we talk about the new appointees. We talk about the people that continue on in their portfolios or in different portfolios. But there's also a couple of people who have been dropped from cabinet as well.
Yeah, where there's winners, there's also losers. And I think, well, first of all, Christy Clark dropped 3 people from cabinet. Norm Letnick from Agriculture, Rolf Sultan from Minister of State for Seniors, and from Social Development, the biggest one of all, Dr. Moira Stillwell. This is a result, I think, mostly of some bad blood between Stillwell and Clark that goes back some months. Bit of payback here. Yeah. Letnick gets a consolation prize. He's a parliamentary minister, parliamentary secretary, but nothing for Moira Stillwell or Rolf Sultan. I don't think she has any grudge against Rolf Sultan or anything like that. The other curious omission, if you want to call it that, I didn't think he was actually going to get into cabinet, but he's also excluded from parliamentary secretaries, is Sam Sullivan, the former Vancouver mayor, who, of course, beat Christy Clark for the mayoralty some years ago. I'm not sure this is all about revenge or what, but I think Clark would have preferred Lord Mayencourt to win that riding's nomination that Sam Sullivan came out of nowhere to win. So he's not only is he not in cabinet, he's also not a parliamentary secretary. And the other interesting wrinkle to do with that, Michael, is Vancouver only has 2 ministers now. I think that's the lowest ever for Vancouver in a provincial government. Surrey has 3, which is a sign of the times, the shift, I think, that's taking place in Metro Vancouver, out of Vancouver, down to south of the Fraser River. That's where the power shift seems to be occurring.
Well, and that's what cabinet appointments often do. They show the government's hand in terms of the legislative priorities for the next session. And this one as well, when you look at the new portfolios that have been created, what kind of indication is this about where our government is going to be focusing?
Well, that's a very good point, because I think what it does show, creating new portfolios that are basically along economic lines and not social lines like technology and innovation and the like. The economy very much at the heart of this government's agenda going forward. It's what got Christy Clark elected. That's what the electorate bought into during the election campaign, was the overwhelming, relentless message that everything was about the economic future of BC, whether it was liquefied natural gas or the other resource industries in this province. And that's why you saw it today. It was very interesting. We saw the pictures of Christy Clark at the announcement today. Look at all those cranes behind her, those big orange cranes in Vancouver.
The port.
Exactly. The economic activity associated with the Port of Vancouver. That was very deliberate by her Premier's office to communicate the message again that everything to do with her is about the economy, jobs, and industrial development and activity. And that's the message today, and that's the message going forward.
All right. Thank you so much. Our Legislative Bureau Chief Keith Barlee joining us from Victoria. Have a great weekend, my friend.
You too, Michael.
Still ahead on Top Story, the Premier campaigns strongly on the development of liquid natural gas as the key to economic prosperity in the province. But is the industry compatible with protecting the environment? Also one of Clark's platforms, the Environmental Protective on LNG, when Top Story returns. Premier Christy Clark unveiled her new cabinet today. It featured some new faces and some familiar faces as well. The Honourable Rich Coleman joining us now, Deputy Premier, Minister of Natural Gas Development and Minister responsible for housing. Hello, Mr. Coleman. How are you?
I'm great. You?
Good. That must be an interesting day. I mean, you've experienced it a few times, but it must have a certain feeling of ceremony to it when you're introduced formally as a cabinet member.
It does, and I've never been introduced this way before. I think the way the Premier did it today was brilliant. Way more people were able to attend because it was in a larger venue, and the way she took the time to explain the ministers, you don't usually get that in a formal setting at Government House. So I think it was just great the way she did it.
Okay, let's talk about your portfolio as Minister of Natural Gas Development. It played a central role in the election, of course. It's top of mind for most people, and it also plays a central role in the Jobs BC plan. What are your priorities as Minister of Natural Gas Development?
Well, the priority is to pursue this generational opportunity. It doesn't come along very often in a history of any jurisdiction. So we have literally billions of dollars interested in being invested in British Columbia to liquefy natural gas that comes out of our gas fields in BC to be shipped over to China, Korea, Japan, and other Asian countries. And really, if we're successful in putting this together, which I think we will be, obviously, we will actually have a generational opportunity where we will get more revenue for our gas relative to how it will affect the provincial budget, help us pay down the debt, and put our next generation of British Columbians on a fiscal footing that they could only dream of 10, 20 years ago.
Now, this, of course, requires a lot of infrastructure and a lot of money. Who's going to be responsible moving forward for the infrastructure and the investment money to make this a reality?
Well, it really is the private sector. You have major companies from around the world. You have Shell, British Gas, Petronas, Nexen, people like Exxon and Chevron and Apache. All of these companies are already here. They are already investing money in the locations they want to put these plants, planning the pipelines, all those things. And it is actually private sector dollars coming into British Columbia that could create up as many as 100,000 jobs over time. And at the other end of the scale, also have a huge impact on our fiscal future as a province.
The president of the Northern Gateway Pipeline, John Cassidy, yesterday made a correlation between the Northern Gateway Pipeline, the money generated from that, and the ability to invest in the infrastructure for liquid natural gas. Considering the Liberal Party and the BC government's opposition to the Northern Gateway Pipeline, what's your reaction to that?
Well, this is a huge investment in natural gas, much larger than a single pipeline like Northern Gateway. You know, all we ask on the pipeline side is that they meet our 5 conditions before we would move forward with the Pipeline BC, and we ran on that, and we're pretty solid on that. But on the natural gas side, this is a product that is in British Columbia. It doesn't need to go across any other provincial boundaries to get to the port. And in actual fact, that we have a lot of gas, and we need to get it to a market which makes sense for British Columbia's future, and that's how we're going to do it.
And considering what's going on in the world, predominantly with Russia and their large liquefied natural gas and their natural gas capacity, what is the market that you see BC moving into? Is it regional? Is it Canadian? Is it international? Is it North American?
Oh, no, this is an international market. This is absolutely China, Asia, places like India, Japan, Korea, China. These countries want the natural gas. The people that are here investing, these major companies that are investing in British Columbia, already have long-term relationships with those countries for customers, and they're looking for the gas. They have the customers. They want to be able to liquefy the gas, ship it over to Asia, and use it to replace other more polluting fuels like coal and other types of fuel.
How do you see this rolling out over the next couple of years? Because obviously there's a lot of strategic alliances that need to be made, some understandings that need to be made between the public and the private. What's your timeline for this?
Right away. I mean, we've been working on this already for a couple of years, and we're seeing people at the cusp of making their significant investment decisions. So you have folks have already actually indicated they're going to go ahead with projects, and how they're going to finance them they've already worked out. And frankly, what it is for us to make sure we're focused as a government, to make sure we take care of the environmental issues as we do this, but most importantly to make sure that we're actually allowing this to be streamlined in such a way that they can make their investments in British Columbia, and we can be competitive in the world marketplace to make sure that we get a piece of this pie. Do you watch the market and the price fluctuation in natural gas? Not a lot. I mean, I get briefed on it pretty regularly, but the reality is that it's all about us getting a product to market that, quite frankly, is orphaned in British Columbia. We only have the North American market right now. The price in North America is significantly depressed relative to the natural gas, but if you can liquefy it and send it to Asia, you can get a higher price for it, and they want it. We've got it. It's a huge opportunity for British Columbia, and we're going to pursue it all to the best of our ability. That's why the Premier, in her vision for this, decided there needed to be a standalone ministry to actually concentrate on this particular file with all its resources to coordinate across government so that we can be successful. Minister Coleman, thank you for your time. Anytime, thanks. All right, thank you. The Premier campaigns strongly on the development of liquid natural gas as the key to economic growth in BC, but is the industry compatible with protecting the environment? Also one of Clark's platforms during the election, the environmental perspective on LNG when Top Story returns. Premier Christy Clark announces her new cabinet, including the new portfolio of natural gas development. The Premier is banking on liquefied natural gas to provide economic stability to the province, but will it put the ecology of BC at risk? That's just ahead on Top Story. Welcome back. Christy Clark campaigned on the promise of economic stability for the province, and a large part of that strategy is the development of the liquefied natural gas industry. Clark is so convinced the economic future of the province is tied to LNG that she created a new portfolio to manage it. The Liberals also campaigned on protecting the environmental beauty of BC, but are the two platforms opposing ideals? For more on the environmental perspective on LNG, we're joined by Gwen Barlee. She is the Policy Director for the Wilderness Committee. Hi, Gwen. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Are these two things compatible, environmental stewardship and liquefied natural gas?
Not the way the provincial government is proposing it. A lot of people aren't aware that over the last 10 years in British Columbia, that the BC government has cut the Ministry of Environment by over 50%. So we don't have people on the ground, we don't have biologists or hydrologists on the ground to watch out and oversee industry. And then the BC government right now is planning on a massive expansion. They're pinning their hopes on prices staying strong in Asia and to do massive exports of liquefied natural gas. That means that we're going to see an increase in fracking to get natural gas, unconventional natural gas.
And this is new technology and a fairly new industry for that matter. And a lot of the environmental, do people understand the environmental impact?
I'm not sure.
Are there studies?
There's lots and lots of studies. And one of the biggest concerns, aside from massively blowing our greenhouse gas reduction targets, is natural gas fracking requires an enormous amount of fresh water. That they take the water and they blast it down under high pressure with sand and lots of toxic chemicals, and they fracture shale bedrock deposits to get at this unconventional natural gas. And so a single well, natural gas well, can use over 1 million gallons of fresh water, and we have thousands and thousands and thousands of natural gas wells. That in turn can contaminate groundwater that we've seen stories throughout North America where people have actually lit water coming out of their pipes on fire because it's so contaminated from natural gas fracking in the area.
Now, there's all kinds of wild cards involved in this as well, including Russia, which has huge stores of natural gas within their borders and are already starting to mine that. The government seems to be putting a lot of emphasis on this, as you saw with Minister Coleman. They're going to pursue this opportunity.
Well, absolutely, they are. They developed the new Ministry of Natural Gas Development. But you're right, when you say Russia is actually ahead of us, so is Australia, so is the United States. We actually have a glut of natural gas in the market right across North America. In 2005, for a unit of natural gas, it was about $15. It's dropped to around $3.50. You can't even cover the cost of production. So what the BC government's doing is they're pinning their hopes on Asia. In Asia, price for a unit of natural gas is around $18. But many analysts, market analysts, think that price is artificially high. That Japan was willing to pay a very high price after they weren't using many of their nuclear reactors with the tsunami. And they think that is due for a market correction.
So with a government that is so focused on this as a job creator, as economic prosperity, what do you do as an environmentalist and someone that's creating environmental policy? Do you stand in the way? Do you work with government? What are your options and what are you planning on doing?
What we're trying to do is have some sober reflection and say one thing for sure that we know, that we don't have federal environmental standards in place. Over the last 18 months, the federal government has gutted the Fisheries Act and the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act. That's come after a decade of gutting environmental protections in British Columbia. And again, the Ministry of Environment being 50% smaller than it was in 2000. So for environmental groups in BC, it's our job as advocates and protectors of the environment to say, hey, wait a minute, we need to take a deep breath here. First of all, there's lots of impacts that natural gas has huge impacts from a climate change perspective. If we had 5 liquefied natural gas terminals come online, it would be equivalent in greenhouse gas emissions to what BC produced in 2010. That's massive.
That is massive. How do you fight that against, though, someone who is in northern BC, it's been in tough times, they're looking for work? I mean, how do you have that message resonate with someone who needs work, who needs money?
Well, I think you also need what it is. You need a reality check. And I think there's a lot of hot air that's happening right now. The government's just gotten elected. They got elected on a jobs platform, much of which was based on the massive expansion and exportation of liquefied natural gas. But when you actually look at the hard numbers, you're saying, is the market going to hold? And a lot of, not the Wilderness Committee, a lot of market analysts are saying, a lot of energy analysts are saying, it's probably not going to hold. So we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. We want to be thoughtful. And the other thing that we don't want to do, people don't want to be destroying and polluting freshwater sources. That we have aquifers that are in danger of being really seriously polluted. That some of the chemicals, it's benzene, it's toluene, those are carcinogens, and that's used in the fracking process to get these unconventional gas deposits. And we just need to take a deep breath. This gas is going to be there for quite a while. We don't want to be blowing our greenhouse gas reduction targets. We don't want to be polluting fresh water. We don't want to be fragmenting wildlife habitat. We want to retain our quality of life in British Columbia. And I think there's a lot of rhetoric and spin happening right now, and we just need to take a deep breath and really look at the facts.
Excellent. Gwen, thank you so much for your perspective. We
My
appreciate
pleasure.
it. We're going to take a break.